Welcome to the ArmaniTalks YouTube channel. I'm your host, ArmaniTalks. In this channel, I'm helping you level up your communication skills every Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. If this is your first time on the channel, be sure to join me for future videos on public speaking, social skills, emotional intelligence, and other topics to help you build your street smarts. Stay updated by hitting that big red subscribe button right on below. Hit that bell notification and never miss another video again. Today's talk is going to be about being a pushover at work. When you think about it, a lot of the communication skills insights discussed in this channel are going to be applied in different ways depending on your profession. If you currently have a job where you're spending roughly around 40 hours a week in this job, you're spending a good amount of your life in this certain environment. It would help if within this environment, people got to see your authentic self, where it doesn't feel like you're putting on this act. Yet, this is very difficult for certain people. Certain people are extremely calm, relaxed, and social with their friends and their family, but at work, they feel uncomfortable. They're more nice than ever. They're more of a people pleaser than ever. And a lot of times, they're a flat out pushover. Now, granted, this is something that's normal when you're first starting a role. Because when you're first starting a role, whether you're a junior position or a manager position, you are entering a brand new environment. And whenever we're entering a brand new environment, there's a level of discomfort that's involved. And it's completely fine in the beginning stages to be a little bit more nicer than you normally are, mainly because you're dependent upon a group to become assimilated within that group. But if you're still being a pushover as more time is elapsing, then there's an issue. That means that you want to look into the mirror and you want to see how to fix it. In this video, I want to share a very strange little fix that I found out throughout early on in my career that I don't think has ever been discussed before. And this is something that worked with me. I highly recommend that you try it out in your unique life with your own unique role. And it comes down to this story. Earlier on in my career, let's say in my mid-20s, I was in a very weird position for a while. Basically, I was in Tampa. I had a cubicle at my office, and I was surrounded by this one team who all worked with one another. I was sitting by this team, yet I didn't work with them. My team was all the way in Chicago. I was a remote employee. So anytime I was getting trained, anytime I had to communicate with my team in Chicago, I was typing away, I was doing the chat, I was on the phone, I was interacting with them digitally. And the people in Tampa, this team was extremely close with one another, always joking around and always using special lingo for their team. Did you know that EFC is down? We gotta reboot it. ACH needs a new deployment today. Clarity needs to be tracked. All this different lingo was stuff that seemed like a foreign language to me. So I couldn't necessarily interact with the people that I physically sat right by. I tried to talk to them for some time. I tried to go to lunch with them, but each time it felt extremely awkward. I just felt like the odd man out. So eventually I started to become closer with my team in Chicago digitally, but I couldn't necessarily speak with too many of the people in the physical location that I was in. As more time started to go on by, one of the girls from the team, her name was Melanie, she comes to my cube one day and she was like, "Hey, Armani, we noticed that you keep to yourself a lot. You gotta be a little bit more social. You're one of the younger guys in the company." When she brought that up, I was livid for two reasons. Number one, didn't she know that most of my team was in Chicago? I'm not just sitting here doing nothing. I'm interacting with them. And number two, you guys should be bringing me into your group. I'm the new guy. And you guys are always using this different technical jargon. I don't know what the hell you're talking about. So I was angry. But she did have a point, because I was going to be spending the next couple of years within this location, possibly. So I should take a better effort to understand what all this lingo means. For the next couple of days, I was spending more and more time hearing all the different words that they were saying, ACH, EFC, PPW, all these random acronyms, I would write them down, and then I would go on the SharePoint. A SharePoint in a company is a centralized location where there's different documents, procedures, and items where new employees and pre-existing employees can check it out just to stay updated. If you guys don't have a SharePoint, you might call it another name, maybe a knowledge base. The more that I read the SharePoint and started to understand all these different acronyms, the more that my worldview started to open. And the more that my worldview within the company started to open, I started to notice something fascinating. What I started to see was that a lot of this lingo from the Tampa company was cross-combining with the lingo from my Chicago company. You want to know what was happening? In the beginning of my job position, I was seeing an elephant trunk and I was seeing an elephant leg. And due to the lack of perspective, I was confusing the trunk and the leg to be completely different from one another. The more that I read the SharePoint, the more that I started to understand the acronym, the more that I zoomed out and I started to see the full elephant. I was making a big mistake. This Tampa company was the trunk, the Chicago company, the team, was the leg. They were all part of the same elephant. Once I started to understand the acronyms through SharePoint, I started to understand that this group that I was sitting with can easily be understood, could easily be a group that I built a bond with. There was one day when one of the members, his name was James, was getting chewed out by his manager. And as he gets out of the manager's office, manager says, "James, fill out your damn Clarity already." Clarity, time tracking tool. As soon as James comes out, I'm like, "Yo, James, man, how come you don't fill out your timesheets?" And James starts giggling. He's like, "Clarity, bro, it's so hard to use. What do you guys use for your team to track time?" Just like that, a conversation material had been created. What I started to learn from that moment was, in the initial stages, I was trying to overcompensate a lot because I didn't have knowledge. But once I started to build knowledge and start to take my position more seriously, I started to build a very web-like mind. I started to see more connections from Chicago to Tampa to even other positions within my floor, which made it easier to network with other people. Even with teams that I normally wouldn't work with, I started to use my time to no longer just surf on Yahoo and Google, watching sports news and all that stuff. And I started to take more time to make myself familiar with my work. The more knowledge that I had, the less of a pushover that I was. And the less of a pushover that I was, the more that people were gravitated towards me. So for you at this point, you may be like, "Okay, but what do I do then? I'm a pushover. Should I start looking through my SharePoint?" Absolutely. See if you guys have a SharePoint, hit up your human resources team, see if you can get access to that, and read as many documents as you can regarding your company. Understand the history of it. Understand the low-level teams of it. Even teams that you don't work for, because that's when you build more confidence in the workplace. But Armani, wait a minute. I don't even have a SharePoint for my company. That's even better. You should create one then. What I started to notice as more time went on by was that for the Chicago team, they had a globalized SharePoint where they talked about the high-level stuff of the company, of when the company started, all that stuff. But they didn't have a low-level SharePoint where if we had a certain little bug for a certain system, we didn't have a document that taught us exactly how to fix it. Sure, older members knew how, but whenever we onboarded a new person, they didn't know how to fix that specific issue. So myself and another coworker, we were like, "Hey, we'll create the SharePoint from scratch." And this led to a slew of benefits. One benefit was that my manager was like, "Yo, Armani actually is being a go-getter. All these other people didn't even notice that we don't have a localized SharePoint." So that was a good thing because it helped me build credibility. Two was that I started to now understand the system that I worked with on a very deep level. I soon started to become a subject matter expert for this technical field. Three was that I had the opportunity to network with plenty of other people. I got to interview them and I started to build a camaraderie with them. And four, a lot of the technical knowledge still helps me to this day. Running a website, for example, has so many technical issues that nowadays I don't immediately have to hire someone. I could resolve it myself because I took the time to build the SharePoint. So these are two strategies that are not often discussed to stop being a pushover at work. Try to build your knowledge more. Try to either learn from a SharePoint or build it from scratch. Did you know that the person who builds a SharePoint is known as the process engineer? Isn't that a fancy, cool title that you want under your belt? So have it under your belt. The thing is that the workplace is not always going to be smooth. It's not always going to be chill, but you can make it smooth and chill by controlling the facets which you can control. If you want more practical insights like this for how to become more charismatic in the work atmosphere, be sure to check out my free daily newsletter, which goes out every single day at 7 p.m. EST. In this newsletter, I address hyper-targeted communication skills issues which are often not picked up by mainstream sources like Google, YouTube, Yahoo, Bing, DuckDuckGo, and all these other sources. You're going to find it in the ArmaniTalks newsletter. Check it out by looking in the description box or the pinned comment right on below. And thank you for joining the ArmaniTalks YouTube channel.